Hello folks, and welcome back to the weekly candle. So this is the plan over the summer. Sunday nights, 6 o'clock. We're still going to light our candles and say our prayers. Now before we get too far ahead with our weekly candles, I thought it would be good just to take a little moment to celebrate the kaleidoscope of voices and faces and stories that made our daily candles. Here we go! We seriously upped our game on the Thursday night thankfulness. Just clapping your hands or bashing your saucepans wasn't enough anymore once we had a few daily candles about expressing your thanks with placards or street art or pavement chalk. As the patterns reminded us,
giving is not locked down. Fun is not locked down. Your creativity is not locked down.
and that creativity was just bursting out in lots of the candles, especially over our creative weekend where we got to meet stall holders like Lynn, who makes these cool montages of front doors, or Katie, who makes these fabulous cards. We got to join her in her workshop and realise that each one of these cards was going to be used by an NHS staffer who was nursing someone with COVID-19. Lynn showed us some fantastic artwork from the Brownies. Amy introduced us to new normal art. And Gillian and Delilah showed us some artwork from Gillian's friend Karen. And Rosemary took us to Portrush and to Donaghadee to see some artwork on stones. All of them ways of bringing art and colour and hope to the situation that we're living through. We even travelled back in time to hear how the Dock Cafe volunteers were involved in creating the huge wish artwork, or the face from space as I call it. And we also checked in to Dock Cafe for Thanksgiving Day and to hear the amazing story of the loo. Jeffrey gave us a guided tour of Pond Park Primary, and Joyce gave us a guided tour of Hope Nursery, and Connor took us on a guided tour of the Refill Quarter. Rodney took us on a guided tour of the family farm, and Susan brought us all the way over to Stewartstown, perfect timing just as the cows were coming in for milking. And more perfect timing, we got garden tours from Ken and from Helen just at that perfect, beautiful time as the whole world was bursting into bloom. Pete took us on a bike ride to Downpatrick, and Skinty took us on a bike ride as well, 250 miles in one day. And Helen brought us back to Down Cathedral for a tour of the war graves. And it wasn't just local tours. Megan took us on a walking tour around Halifax in Yorkshire. And Carol and Peter brought us all the way out to Lake Ontario in Canada. And once we had the travel bug, and when we were getting a wee bit fed up of the rain at home, we took a few trips back in time to the Bennett's big trip around Europe in the camper van to see fjords and twisty hairpin bends and mountain passes and fabulous cathedrals and World War rocket sites and boats, which were really interesting, and Christmas on the French Riviera, and some of the most spectacular overnight camping spots in history. And speaking of history, we managed to cram in a bit of history to our daily candles, whether marking VE Day or telling the story of Belfast's trams, ancient and modern. We went back in time to meet Florence Nightingale, and we met Eleanor, whose dad designed the fireplaces on Titanic. And she wasn't the only one with old photos to show off. Janice managed to find some wedding photos, which inspired some of the rest of us to dig out a fair few embarrassing pictures from the archives. And Susan even went back as far as a 1916 postcard. But we didn't just look to the past, but also to the future. And as always with Daily Candles, at least once a week, we filled our souls with poetry.
Every day I see or hear something that more or less kills me with delight.
Who also was my mother.
And in my hand, a forest lies asleep.
I come into the peace of wild things.
The Lord is my pace setter, I shall not rush.
After the last E had uzzed its last uzz, and there was all kinds of song and dance and movement and rhythm. And if that all sounds too energetic, just light the fire and relax. Or finish, finally, that 1,000-piece jigsaw. So that was the daily candles leading up to that emotional, unforgettable night for number 100 when we all lit our candles together on Zoom. And since then, last week, Dennis started us off on the weekly candle. Little bit of everything that we tend to include in these things. Dennis brought us a little bit of poetry, a little bit of personal history, little bit of travel, and so that was a great way to get our weekly candles started off. And still, we would love to hear from you. If you'd like to share photos, videos, stories, anything, please send them through to me. There are so many more stories to tell as the weeks go on. Different stories, but always our prayer is the same. For light in a dark world, and hope in a fearful heart, and peace in a troubled soul.